Do you recall the surprise at every mid-century church supper when a dish arrived that tasted like dessert, yet felt like home? That's the magic of carrot and pineapple casserole, a seemingly odd pairing of shredded carrots and sweet canned pineapple, bound together by eggs and butter, crowned with a bubbling layer of crushed Ritz crackers. It was a recipe that raised eyebrows in potlucks and brought everyone running back for seconds. But how did this sweet, savory marvel become a fixture in dusty church kitchens from Ohio to Alabama? Imagine stepping into a church basement kitchen in the late 1950s. Wooden tables lined with mixing bowls, the hum of conversation punctuated by the soft clink of spoons. You slide open the oven door, and there it is, a rectangular pan crowned with a blanket of Ritz cracker crumbs, golden and glistening under the fluorescent lights. That aroma, equal parts buttery comfort and bright sweetness, pulls every hungry soul in from the hallway before they even glimpse what's inside. You begin by preheating your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 degrees Celsius, the heat promising transformation. In a large bowl, combine 3 cups of finely shredded carrots, fresh from the garden or gently thawed from frozen, each strand a thread in this tapestry of flavor. Next, drain a 20-ounce can of crushed pineapple as carefully as you'd conceal a treasured secret. No extra juice to dilute this miracle. In a separate mixing bowl, whisk together 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, 2 large eggs, and a ½ cup of melted butter. Watch as the blend becomes silky and luminous, catching the light like afternoon sun through stained glass windows. Gently fold in your prepared carrots and pineapple, marveling at how the vivid orange and golden hues swirl together. Finally, sprinkle in 1 cup of crushed Ritz crackers, stirring just until every morsel glistens with promise. You transfer this colorful batter into a buttered baking dish, smoothing the top with a spatula, then scatter a few extra cracker crumbs like edible confetti. Slide it in. Set your timer for 40 minutes, and let the anticipation build. Soon, that crispy, caramelized crust will break to reveal a tender, custardy surprise beneath. Imagine a late summer church social where the harvest's bounty filled every table. And there, gleaming in the middle, set a row of mushroom-stuffed zucchini boats, each one a tiny green vessel brimming with savory surprise. You begin by preheating the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, 190 degrees Celsius, the heat promising to transform humble garden squash into something sublime. While it warms, trim and have 6 medium zucchini lengthwise, then scoop out the tender centers to form boats. Set those shavings aside. Every scrap will find its way back into the filling. In a hot skillet, melt 2 tablespoons of butter, then add 1 diced onion and 2 cloves of minced garlic, sautéing until they whisper soft sweetness. Stir in 8 ounces of chopped mushrooms, fresh from the woods or canned from pantry shelf, and cook until their juices caramelize. Season with a pinch of salt, a crack of pepper, and a teaspoon of dried thyme, letting the fragrance rise like hymnals in a Sunday choir. Transfer this aromatic mixture to a bowl, then fold in ½ cup of fresh breadcrumbs, or crushed crackers, and 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese. Spoon the filling generously into each zucchini hull, mounding it so the tops promise a golden crust. Arrange the boats in a buttered baking dish, drizzle with a bit of melted butter, and slide them into the oven. 40 minutes later, the zucchini will have softened just enough to give under your fork, and the filling will be bubbling at the edges, crowned with toasted crumbs. The result? A garden-fresh vessel carrying an earthy, mushroom-rich cargo, simple, elegant, and proof that church kitchens could summon culinary magic from the smallest harvest. Creamed dried beef over rice arrives at the table as a savory celebration of pantry, thrift turned Sunday supper star. You begin by simmering 2 cups of long-grain rice in lightly salted water, stirring only once to keep each fluffy grain separate and gleaming. While it cooks, melt 3 generous tablespoons of butter in a sturdy skillet and whisk in an equal mound of flour until the mixture bubbles into a pale, golden roux. Slowly pour in 2 cups of whole milk, whisking without pause so the sauce thickens to a satiny ribbon that coats the back of your spoon. Then, Tear 8 ounces of chipped dried beef into slender ribbons and submerge them in the cream. They soften instantly, releasing a gentle, salty richness that turns the sauce a delicate rose. A light crack of black pepper and a whisper of paprika deepen the flavor and lend a hint of warmth. By the time the rice is tender, your sauce is velvety and fragrant. Spoon the creamed beef generously over mounded rice. Watch how the sauce pools in gentle valleys, and finish with a scattering of fresh parsley for a bright contrast. Each forkful marries the pillowy rice with the lush, unctuous sauce, evoking church hall suppers where humble ingredients inspire genuine delight and community warmth. Cornmeal dumplings over stewed tomatoes arrives at the table as a humble yet heartening pledge of resilience and warmth. Start by simmering a quart of fresh or canned tomatoes with a diced onion, a tablespoon of sugar, and a splash of vinegar in a heavy pot. Let the mixture bubble down until the tomatoes collapse into a sweet tart sauce, their juices thickened and fragrant. While the sauce simmers, whisk together 1 cup of yellow cornmeal, a scant teaspoon of salt, and just enough boiling water to form a drop batter, thick enough to hold shape, loose enough to steam. Drop heaping spoonfuls of this golden dough onto the bubbling tomato surface, cover tightly, and let the steam work its magic. Within 20 minutes, each dumpling puffs into a tender cloud, its exterior steam just firm enough to cradle the bright, tomato-kissed center. Scoop generous portions into deep bowls so the saucy tomatoes pool around pillowy dumplings, and let a swirl of pepper and a scattering of chopped parsley lend color and spark. Every bite melds the dumpling's gentle corn sweetness with the sauce's tangy richness, a Depression-era testament to making do, where a few pantry staples became a meal that filled bodies and lifted spirits. Cabbage and noodles may sound unassuming, but on the table, it speaks volumes of immigrant kitchens, worn wooden spoons, and the art of turning scraps into satisfaction. Begin by slicing half a head of green cabbage into fine ribbons. In a large skillet, melt a generous knob of butter. No margarine here, just the real thing, and toss in a diced onion. Let it soften and begin to caramelize, releasing that slow sweetness that signals comfort's close at hand. Now in go the cabbage ribbons. Sauté them gently, letting the edges brown slightly, stirring just enough so they soften without breaking down completely. You want that mix of tender bite and crispy bits. That's where the flavor lives. While the cabbage works its magic, boil a pot of egg noodles until just tender. Drain them, reserving a splash of that starchy water, and fold them gently into the cabbage mixture. Add another pat of butter and that spoonful of pasta water to help everything cling just right. A good grind of black pepper and a light pinch of salt finish the dish. Nothing more, nothing less. Serve it warm, maybe with a spoonful of sour cream if the fridge is kind, or a side of applesauce if you want to lean into the old world charm. It's not flashy, but it never needed to be. For so many families, this was the taste of Thursday nights, of making ends meet with grace, and passing down a lesson in the quiet beauty of enough. Mock chicken legs were never about fooling anyone. They were about creativity, economy, and making something feel special, even when meat was scarce. To start, you take ground veal and ground pork, though in tougher times, just ground pork would do, and season it with minced onion, a dash of poultry seasoning, salt, and pepper. This mixture is gently shaped by hand around wooden skewers or clean popsicle sticks to form the familiar drumstick shape. It's not just the look that matters. It's the ritual of eating it like a Real chicken leg that added a touch of dignity to the plate. Once shaped, each leg is dipped in a light egg wash and rolled generously in crushed saltine crackers or breadcrumbs. The goal? That satisfying crunch when you take the first bite. They're pan-fried in a shallow skillet until golden and crisp on all sides, then finished in the oven to ensure they're cooked through and juicy at the center. Served hot, usually with mashed potatoes and a ladle of creamy gravy or canned green beans. These mock legs brought a sense of celebration to a meal that cost very little. For children, it was a moment of delight, holding a drumstick like the grown-ups did. For adults, it was a proud answer to hard times, turning what you had into something that still felt whole. Mock chicken legs weren't pretending, they were performing. They played the role of Sunday dinner when Sunday dinner couldn't afford to show up. Scalloped potatoes with hot dogs was the kind of dish that could stretch across a weeknight table and still earn smiles from every corner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was golden, bubbling, and dependable, made from two of the most reliable staples in any mid-century kitchen. You start by peeling russet potatoes, about 4 or 5, and slicing them thin, paper thin if your hand's steady. In a buttered baking dish, you layer the slices with a scattering of sliced hot dogs, usually cut on the bias to feel a little fancy. Each layer gets a light sprinkle of flour, salt, and pepper, a Depression-era trick that helps thicken everything without needing a roux. In a saucepan, warm 2 cups of milk with a tablespoon of butter until steaming. Then pour it gently over the layers until the potatoes are nearly submerged. The top gets dotted with more butter and, if times were good, a light handful of shredded cheddar. Covered with foil, it bakes slowly in the oven until the potatoes are fork tender and the whole dish is creamy and rich. The final step is uncovering it for the last 10 minutes so the top can crisp and brown, forming that signature golden crust. Spoon it onto plates and watch the creamy sauce cling to every bite, with the salty snap of hot dog slices giving contrast to the soft, starchy potatoes. 4 families scraping together meals from what was left in the fridge. This was a victory. It wasn't just filling, it was comforting. And somehow, when it came out of the oven, piping hot and speckled with browned edges, it felt like more than the sum of its parts. It felt like home. Cream chipped beef on toast, or, as many knew it, the Suez, was the meal that marched straight out of military mess halls and into American kitchens. Salty, simple, and steeped in World War II memory. It was a dish that fed both soldiers and struggling families with equal practicality. It starts with a jar or pouch of dried, chipped beef, paper-thin slices of preserved meat, often tucked away in pantries for emergencies. You rinse the beef briefly to remove excess salt, then slice it into narrow strips. In a saucepan, you melt a few tablespoons of butter, whisk in flour to make a smooth roux, and then slowly add milk, stirring constantly until the sauce thickens to a rich, pourable cream. In goes the beef, folded gently into the white sauce. Some cooks added a pinch of paprika or black pepper, while others stirred in a dash of Worcestershire or a spoonful of peas to stretch it even further. It's spooned generously over crisp, buttered toast, usually white bread, lightly browned to hold its structure under the creamy weight. The result? A savory, warming plate that fed millions for pennies. During wartime rationing, it kept bellies full on the front lines and the home front. And even after the war, it stayed in rotation, part nostalgia, part necessity, all comfort. Sure, it was sometimes joked about for its appearance or nickname, but for countless Americans, it was a taste of survival, routine, and resilience. It reminded families of discipline and duty, and of how even preserved meat and stale bread could become a meal worth gathering around. Depression-era meatloaf with oatmeal wasn't just a dish, it was a strategy. In homes where every ounce of meat had to be stretched, this humble loaf was the quiet hero of the dinner table. Ground beef formed the base when it was affordable, but what made this meatloaf distinct wasn't the meat itself. It was the binders. Rolled oats, not breadcrumbs, were stirred in to bulk it up, absorbing flavor and moisture while making 1 pound of meat feed an entire family. Chopped onions, a splash of milk, an egg or two, and sometimes grated carrot or celery scraps gave it life and texture. A dash of ketchup or tomato soup stirred into the mix gave a sweet tang and softened every bite. It was packed into a loaf pan, not for presentation, but because it made slicing easy and predictable. The top was brushed with more ketchup, or if you were lucky, a bit of brown sugar mixed with mustard for a caramelized crust. Then came the slow bake, about an hour, filling the house with a smell that said, "Dinner is coming, and it's going to be all right." Served with mashed potatoes or canned green beans, this meatloaf didn't pretend to be fancy. It was meant to fill you, warm you, and offer seconds. Leftovers were often even better. Sliced cold for sandwiches the next day, slathered in mayonnaise or mustard, tucked between thick slices of white bread. This dish represented the creativity of American homemakers under pressure. With every slice, it told a story, not of poverty, but of perseverance, of doing the best with what you had and making sure no one left the table hungry. Peanut butter stuffed onions. Yes, you heard that right. Were one of the strangest Depression-era inventions to ever grace the dinner table. But when ingredients were scarce and taste had to take a back seat to survival, resourcefulness often led to unexpected combinations. The dish started with large yellow or white onions, peeled and boiled whole until just tender. The tops were sliced off, the centers hollowed carefully with a spoon, and the layers set aside, not discarded because nothing went to waste. Into the empty onion shells went a surprising filling. A mix of peanut butter, chopped onion innards, a bit of stale bread or crumbs, salt, and a splash of milk to bind it all together. Some cooks added a touch of paprika or dry mustard to give a sharper edge. The stuffed onions were then placed in a baking dish, drizzled with a bit of bacon grease or butter if you had it, and baked until the tops browned slightly and the peanut butter filling firmed up inside. The result? Earthy, soft onion wrapping a warm, nutty center that was oddly satisfying, especially to those who hadn't tasted meat in weeks. The dish was rich in protein, cheap to make, and surprisingly filling, even if it never became anyone's favorite. What it lacked in flavor harmony, it made up for in creativity. It was a testament to the era's no waste, make do mentality. Housewives didn't have the luxury of turning up their noses. If the pantry offered onions and peanut butter, then supper would come from those too. This bizarre recipe lives on not for its deliciousness, but for what it symbolized: survival, stubborn hope, and the strange magic of feeding a family when it seemed impossible. And that, my friends, was just a taste of the strange, scrappy, and unforgettable meals that helped America get by when times were toughest. If you enjoyed this journey through history's most unusual recipes, don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts or memories in the comments, and subscribe for more forgotten food stories served fresh every week.